Finance Committee to order. All stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And notification for this meeting has been posted, published, distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. If I could ask someone for approval of the current agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should wait on that, if you don't mind deferring that until later on.
Okay. Let's then jump to citizens' comments. Is there anyone here, either in person or online, who would like to make a comment during our citizens' comment period?
Yes.
And there was no one in attendance, and Sarah has indicated there's no one online. So let's then move on to some of our updates. And Mr. Dale Butts, if you'd like to give us an update from the Assistant County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Just a brief update on the Finance Division. You're going to hear from some of the department heads here momentarily, but for the other departments, I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on. As far as the assessor's office, they've been continuing work on the 4% residential applications that come in on a daily basis. As of January 7th, there were over 13,000 of those that had been received, down to around 3,000 remaining under review. So pretty good percentage there of getting those turned out. One of the things that Ms. Sanders did this year was got that application process online. At the time she did that, Beaufort County was about only the third county who had begun to allow those online filings of applications, and that was a big success, with 93% of the applications received having been filed online. You all know about the refund committee that has been reinstituted this year to assist with late penalties, and we also have scheduled a roundtable discussion to see what other ways we might can assist the assessor's office going forward with this process. Ms. Sanders is going to brief you this afternoon on the upcoming quadrennial reassessment that will take place next year, but things have to get started this year on that. So give you a few dates and that sort of thing that you can keep in mind moving forward. Over in business services, January 1st was the beginning of the statewide standardization of business license. There have been some changes as it relates to long-term and short-term rentals. And you'll hear more about that here in just a little while as well. Letters went out to the owners of rental properties notifying them of the changes. Intergov, the new software, up and running in business services, and as far as I know, all is well with that. From our HR department, employees on COVID leave, of course, no surprise, that's at an all-time high for Beaufort County. And HR is constantly researching the CDC guidelines, updating staff as appropriate concerning COVID. We have had a lot of departments in this division who have been hurt staffing-wise because of that issue. HR has also finished up meetings with the departments on the full-time employee program, and those departments that requested to meet, they've recently wrapped those up. HR is updating the Munis software to reflect the feedback from those department head meetings. Over in procurement, the recent addition of an admin specialist has fully staffed the procurement and purchasing department. They've been busy putting together training videos for the new SharePoint site. This will enable our department heads and their signed staff to watch step-by-step instruction videos on creating requisitions, obtaining vendor quotes, the contract process, and much more. And in addition, they're updating the purchasing and procurement manual, the employee guide, and the contract threshold guide, all of which will be uploaded to the website and or the intranet. You met Mrs. Green, our new Register of Deeds, last week. She started on January the 3rd. Their volume of business is still running high, of course. They're looking to fill 2 vacant positions in that particular office, as we are in a couple of the offices throughout the division. You'll be hearing from Mr. Hayes Williams, our CFO, and also Pinky Harriot, our budget director, with their updates next. And then, like I said, Ms. Sanders from the assessor's office will brief you on the reassessment for next year. But if you guys don't have any questions for me, that's all I have at this point.
Any questions for Mr. Butts? Yes, Mr. Glover.
Just quickly, Mr. Butts, can you periodically give a update on the full employment of different departments, particularly Public Works and Stormwater? Just an update on where things are and whether we have reached full employment in those departments.
Yes, sir.
They're the ones that do most of the on-ground kind of work.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not saying that places like finance is not important, but, you know, for me in the rural area, the guys on the ground is the one I really like to see.
I understand.
Thank you, sir.
I'll get with Mr. Fralix and we'll see where that stands. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Anybody else have a question for Mr. Butts? Thank you, Mr. Butts. I think we're good to go.
We have a full quorum now.
We do have a full quorum now, so if I can go ahead and ask for someone to make a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. And without objection, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda, which I don't see any objection. Let's move on to approving the minutes from September 20th, October 18th, and November 15th.
Again, so moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Following.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glover. Is there any objection to that? Seeing no objection, let's keep moving on. So, Mr. Hayes, would you please come and join us? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman and council members. It's been a long time since we met. I'm going to go back to some stuff like that happened in November, such as the PTO payout. In November, we had a special pay for the PTO. We had it was for employees to use up to get paid for 60 hours of PLT or half their PLT balance. We had a total of 479 employees participate in it. The total with expense was about $776,000. It was very well received. We're working on bond payments. They should be going out this week that are due in February. It's going to be about $6.5 million. I wanted to update you on the external audit. The external auditors, Malden and Jenkins, finished their field work in December. They're in the process of reviewing. It should be going to their concurring review tomorrow. We're hoping to get a draft of it so we can start doing our internal review on it. And hopefully we'll get it dated as of 1/21/22. This will be a really good thing. This will be the earliest that it's been dated in 6 years if we can get it there. And we're pushing really hard. We're planning on meeting with department heads after we get done with the audit and go over some items related to finance and helping them out. And that's really all I have to report from the finance office, other than the financial statements, which I'll go into afterwards if anybody has any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Williams? Seeing no questions, thank you, Mr. Williams. Appreciate that.
Okay. The financial statements we're going to go over is fairly flat. There aren't a whole lot of exciting things going on. Our license and permits are lagging right now. We're going to start seeing a lot of activity from January to the April cutoff. So that should be going up significantly. Our intergovernmental revenues are still down. We haven't gotten our second quarter yet. Typically we get it after this meeting sometime in the 21st to the 25th of the month after the following the quarter. So that should be a significant bump there. Our charges for services, again, in our revenues, those have been high as the Register of Deeds is having another record year. the interest income is down due to lower interest rates. And our miscellaneous revenues, which is that large orange or green spike there, that's there because of the sale of the DSN building of $737,000. When we look at our overall expenditures, they're tracking almost exactly. We're at the percent of the budget expendence is about 50.54, and the percentage of the year is 50%. Everything, if you look at the graphs, pretty flat. There's one spike in the other, but the public health is higher, a little bit higher than last year, because they paid the third quarter of payments to the various agencies of Beaufort, Jasper, Comp Health, and Beaufort Memorial in December, at the end of December, instead of January 1st. The reason it's down is the spending by economic development is slightly less than expected. I have the details of the revenues on pages 17 through 20 of your agenda packet, and they all roll into those financial statements. And I have I guess it's not a new statement, but it's one I haven't presented before. It's the Rural and Critical Lands Program. I've been asked by the Rural and Critical Lands to give them a snapshot of where it is every quarter, and I've been doing this for the past year and a half. But I wanted to share it with y'all to see kind of where they were on everything. So if you look at it, you have the only revenue they really have this year is interest, and you can see the expenditures. You have your professional fees, which include our consulting services that we get from outside. And then you have your land conservation at Henry Farms, the Dale PDR, and the land acquisition of Bermuda Bluff. And then they have a Fort Fremont project that they're working on. And then you have a total from last year for fund balance, and a new total of what's left in this fund is about $15 million, less the two encumbrances that we have. So at December 31st of this year, they had approximately $15,322,000 left in their fund balance to spend for rural and critical. And as we go on and I get a little further from the audit and have a little bit more time on my hands, I plan to be sharing more reports with you. But anyways, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Williams from council members? I think you're off the hook. I don't see any, so.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ace.
Like you say, there's nothing exciting, which is a good thing.
It is. There's going to be some exciting news we'll share after the audit's concluded and finalized, so it's coming.
All right, great. Let's move on to number 9. If Ms. Harriot would like to come forward and give us an update, please.
Good afternoon. Just a quick update on the fiscal year 23 budget process. As Mr. Butts mentioned, we have wrapped up our FTE meetings with the department heads to get accurate numbers to prepare for the budget season. Currently, we have, as he mentioned, their HR is cleaning up the Munis side, and we're entering personnel figures into our new budgeting software called ClearGov. We are also updating all of their fringe benefits and their retirement system information for them, and then they will have access to enter their budgets, their operational line items over the course of the next month. And to kind of stay along with our calendar, we will allow them to enter their budgets up through February 11th, and then we will prepare the proposed budget for the administration to review before we come to council with the first draft. Another thing in the budget process that we've been working with the engineering division is our three-year CIP plan. So we have tied this CIP plan back to the comprehensive plan that was previously approved by council. And currently we have received all of the countywide capital requests for the next 3 years. And we are currently ranking all of the partially funded projects. And we will have a spreadsheet for council to review for funded projects and partially funded projects, and also unfunded projects. So that's where we are in our budget process. Can I answer any questions?
Maybe. Is it possible for us to get a written timeline? I didn't get a chance to review the package. Was that in there with deadlines?
The budget calendar?
Yeah, calendar.
Yes, sir. I think we went over that during the budget retreat, but I can make sure we get you another copy.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
Any other questions for Ms. Harriot? Thank you, Ms. Harriot. Good job, thank you. All right, let's move on to number 10, and we have Ms. Sanders coming forward, our assessor, and giving a presentation regarding the 5-year reassessment process and our timeline. So thank you for coming, Ms. Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale and Eric and Whitney, for allowing me to come speak with you, Mr. Chairman, as well as other members of the Finance Committee. As we all know, that the quadrennial reassessment is an important process. And this process, it allows for the assessor's office to equalize and appraise the market values of all properties in Beaufort County. The reassessment cycle is determined, or is on a calendar determined by the South Carolina Department of Revenue. And our turn for our reassessment cycle is going to come in 2023 tax year. The process is also outlined in the South Carolina Code of Laws. So there's some important dates that I would like for the committee to just keep in mind as a beginning of introducing it or talking about the process. The valuation effective date of this quadrennial reassessment is December 31st of 2022. The tentative scheduled date to mail notices to taxpayers is August 25th, 2023. Currently, we have over 133,000 properties in Beaufort County that we assess. We anticipate that there will be an increase because typically Beaufort County is increasing in the number of parcels between 5 and 10%. And we know that because of the number of deeds that are coming through the Register of Deeds office, as Mr. Butts mentioned in his overview. So we're going to mail out over 133,000 assessment notices to taxpayers. The deadline for taxpayers to appeal is November 28th, 2023. The reason why we chose November 28th, 2023 is because we had to take into account that the 25th, the 90-day period, falls during the Thanksgiving holiday, and as well as there's a Veterans Day at the beginning of November. So we want to give taxpayers an opportunity. We don't want them to miss any opportunity to be able to appeal if they choose to do so. Now, some of the things that the assessor's office is doing currently, we're reviewing sales data. We're looking at statistical trends to prepare for our modeling of the numbers. Prior to mailing notices, we will send our statistical data to the Department of Revenue for them to approve our reassessment. When notices are mailed, just keep in mind that you're going to receive feedback because we're sending out assessment notices to all our taxpayers that own property in Beaufort County. You will experience an increased number of calls. You will get questions. You will get concerns about the reassessment itself. There's going to be an education process that I'm planning to provide taxpayers in advance of mailing notices. Some of the thoughts that we've done in the past, some of the things that we've done in the past was we update our website, we update social media, we have a reassessment guide that we will update to prepare for the reassessment. This brochure is downloadable so taxpayers can have it at their convenience. We're going to do an informational video. And based on the situation we're in during that in 2023, we potentially could do community presentations. So we are looking forward to a reassessment because it gives us an opportunity to equalize these numbers. And we have to have a chance to actually see our data and how Beaufort County is performing with the market. Is there any questions that you may have?
Any questions from anyone? Is there anything from council that that you're gonna need from us, Ms. Sanders, in this process? Or how does that work when it comes to Finance Committee or council itself? How do we support you, or what decisions do we have to make for you?
Well, one of the things that was going to be supported in our budget, when we put in our budget, we have to allot for different things that's going to have to get us to that point. Not only staffing, but mailing notices, that's 133,000. We have to prepare for that. I work with the finance department if we have to print those notices. Also, educating the public. We may have to educate council on how, other forms to talk to council if Eric chooses to do so, so we can explain what we're doing, what those statistical numbers mean, how did we get there, what measures did we use to determine the values, and what does the values actually mean? Because it's a lot of confusion. What's a cap value? What's a market value? Why did my value change or did not change? My neighbor's value, how do I appeal? So education is the biggest thing that we can do with council, but also with the finance committee. I'm going up in the budget, I have to prepare for the rest of this year, and then our reassessment overlaps into 2023, which is another fiscal year. So it has to be in both of those years.
Good. Any other questions? Yep, Mr. Passman, go ahead.
Yes. When the properties are being reassessed, is there a maximum increase that a property can have as part of their reassessment?
That's a very good question. The South Carolina Code of Law says we must determine the fair market value of the property. But there's a part in the South Carolina Code of Law that came into existence in 2006 and we implemented in 2008 called capping. You probably heard of that. And what it basically, if a property owner has retained their property prior to 2008, they may experience the third cap. So what the capping law basically says is your property value increased from the last quadrennial reassessment, or the last time the property was reassessed, more than 15%. The most you can be taxed at is at a 15% increase. So if your property is $100,000 and your property does not go over $115,000, then the most you can be taxed is the $115,000. If it goes to 200, we can only tax you at $115,000. For the cap, that's the cap statutory value, but we still have to determine a fair market value by law.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Glover, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Sanders, you talked about education. Do you or have you in the past gone out to communities to have workshops on how to and what does the reassessment mean, et cetera, and working with groups in various communities?
Yes, sir. This is personally, in my 21 years at Beaufort County, over my history of being in the assessor's office in 2 jurisdictions, this is my 8th reassessment. Mm-hmm. And during the past reassessment, we always made an effort to go out into communities, go to church locations, go to either school events we announced that we're going to be at a different location, or we are invited by taxpayers or groups, and we encourage taxpayers to come. So yes, we do. One of the things I thought about is getting with Eric and broadcasting to do something on Coastline. There's a I wouldn't say an animated video that I really like that Barnwell County did that I want to adopt, because people they're tuned to visuals. And so those are type of things that will help taxpayers to understand it on a taxpayer level. But yes, we do go out. And that's why I said, depending on the situation, we don't know what COVID is going to do or not do, but we want to go out to communities. In the past, I've been to Sun City, been to St. Helena, been to different parts of Beaufort in that local area. So yes, we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Sanders? Yep, Mr. McCollum, go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. It's important. I have just a quick question. I want to circle back to that 15% cap. Is the value of the home capped at 15% raise, and then is the tax capped at 15% as well?
For the purposes of the capping is on the total valuation of the property. So we cap the value of the property. Now with the taxation, if there is amount that the council can decide whether to raise millage or lower millage, there's portions of the statute that discuss that, but that I will have to get with legal. That's not a question I'm prepared to answer right now. With regards to at the reassessment year, can you raise the millage or lower the millage or those type of things? But I know with the value itself, capping is important. It's only a 15% cap if it hasn't transferred interest.
Right. So the property tax is calculated on the capped value, not essentially the fair market value. Is that right?
And the taxes are calculated on a taxable value. So the taxable value can include, and this is where it gets confusing, it can include the taxable value as well as untaxable items. So we inform taxpayers is the taxable value that your taxes are taxed on, not necessarily the cap value. In theory, the cap value is what they're being taxed on, but we have cases where portion of the property is capped and other portions are not.
So if, for example, there was a $200,000 property, then the most that could go up would be 15% of the $200,000 or $30,000?
The cap number, correct. Now, the market number could go up to another number. It could go up.
I got that.
Right.
But the cap number could only go to 230. And then is the property tax calculated on the 230 or fair market value?
The 230. That's the cap
Okay.
number, yes.
So essentially, the property tax would go up 15%. So if it was a $2,000 property tax, then it would go up $300.
In theory, yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add the caveat that Ebony was talking about, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You know, we're limited by law to how much we can raise taxes. And in reassessment years, it's particularly capped to a rollback amount. In other words, we're only allowed to collect the same amount that we collected last year. So we adjust the millage rates across the board to limit how much we collect from all the houses, all the real estate in the county. But we're also allowed to increase the amount of taxes by CPI, and I think population is another qualifier. An increase in population, increase in CPI, allow us to collect a little bit more. And then, of course, we can always break the cap by a supermajority of county council. So those are the qualifiers. One other thing I'd like to make sure everybody understands, yes, there is a 15% limit on the amount of the increase. However, that doesn't apply if there is a change of ownership. If there's a change of ownership, the county will reappraise the property at its fair market value.
That is correct. Mr. Llewellyn is correct. If there's an ATI, an assessable transfer interest, that's when the cap falls off, and those individuals that transfer interest do not qualify for capping. He is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Sanders?
I just want council to be aware of the reason we are doing this today. It seems like a long time out, but you may get calls of increased county vehicle activity in neighborhoods and areas and residential areas and things like that. So we want to make you aware that that will be the reason why people may see more county vehicles, possibly even parked on their property or whatever. It'll probably be a part of the reassessment going on. So.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, one final question.
Yes, Larry, go ahead.
What's the time frame for the change of ownership?
Well, the change of ownership, so if a property owner changes, let's use current. If a property owner transfers interest in 2022, then we recognize that assessable transfer interest in 2023. So they will get reassessed at full market value in 2023, and therefore they're not qualified for capping.
Okay, thank you. But if the property changed in 2020, that may not apply.
Correct, because when it's time for the reassessment, their property was already reassessed in 2021. So they had a mini reassessment. So when we do the countywide reassessment, what will happen is what their number is or their market value, if the new market value increases more than 15%, that individual will be entitled to the 15% increase at the time of the quadrennial reassessment if they haven't transferred.
I'm glad that you're in charge of this, not me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Glover. Yes, Mr.
You're saying, help me with this, because I know that you work with some family members where there was actually a death occurred, and the property was transferred over to the spouse and the family. With the capping, does that pass on, or the cap is removed?
Okay, so if it's passed from spouse to spouse,
No.
we're saying a deceased spouse, from this spouse to spouse, even if it's a divorce.
Yeah.
The code says that property, it will retain its cap. If it transfers from a parent to a child and the property was at 4%, then that property retains the cap. But if the property is at 6% and passes to a child, then the cap is removed. If it's 6% and it transfers to a spouse, the cap will remain. Sometimes we can tell based on the deed transfer and the names and what's written in the deed, but there are other times we have to remove the cap and let them appeal to tell us, to demonstrate to us, no, this is my spouse, or this is a divorce situation, because names change. People use different names when they're filing their documents. So that's why the appeal, that 90-day period, is important when they get that assessment notice.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, Mr. Passman, go ahead.
Regarding the transfer of ownership when a spouse passes away, do they automatically stay or do they have to reapply for the 4% cap?
Well, 4% legal residency and capping is two different things.
Okay.
Capping is a statutory value, it affects value in the valuation of the property, what value they're gonna pay taxes on. The 4% is actually about legal residency, it's a special assessment, it's a type of exemption. So if it goes like a JTRS and it's a passing of an individual and they file a JTRS, typically with JTRSs and if it's a spouse, we do not remove the legal residency, we leave it. But if we have no indication, we remove it and have them reapply, because we do not know who the parties are. So, like I said, it's two different parts of the statute that we have to apply. 4% is legal residency exemption, and capping is when the property value changes.
Okay. It just so shows how smart you are.
Any other questions for Ms. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make one additional comment about the 4% or 6%. Many on council are getting calls about the 4%, 6% process and and the backlog and things like that. I am working, you all have already have taken steps to work with the treasurer, Ms. Sanders, to bring some relief to that, but I'm also working on that from county administration side to ease the burden on the taxpayers and to try to alleviate that burden on the assessor's office as well through some modifications to our review process. So we'll have more details on that in the coming weeks, but we are working to resolve that issue.
Good, thank you, because I know that's, I think I've had calls, I think most everybody else has had calls on that as well. So, Ms. Sanders, we know how busy you are, but it sounds like you're going to get busier with this coming up here, and there's no other person we'd rather have in the position right now, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Ms. Sanders because the question I asked her a few minutes ago, I know she must have resolved that because I never heard from the family again. So I want to publicly say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, very good information for all of us over the upcoming year. All right, so let's move on now to item number 11. And I think Mr. Kevaney is going to handle this, a discussion of new business license fee ordinance to long-term rentals of residential properties.
Good afternoon, how are you? In 2020, December of 2020, County Council adopted a new business license ordinance. And under the definition of business, under the new ordinance, it deleted a provision that was in the old ordinance. And so what we have up there, if you could just focus on the 2014 for me, Sarah. That'll be great. So you'll see that that highlighted area that was in our original ordinance, the one from 2014, did not carry forward into our current ordinance that went into effect January 1st. What that effectively means is that folks who own and rent out one single piece of property, a rental property, long-term, that is for more than 30 days at a time, are now required to apply for and receive a business license. Some of the members of council have been made aware of this issue. It came to our attention last week. We did some research on it and found that in fact, that highlighted provision of the 2014 ordinance did not come forward. And so that gives us the situation that we're in. If council would like us to amend our current ordinance to include this provision that was deleted, we can do so. We just need to know if you guys want us to do that.
So when I read that, the code provisions there that Sarah just had up, it says, in addition to the above described activities, anyone that is 2 or more businesses, it doesn't say that a person just with one rental has to get a business license. And we heard it was just one rental last week. So by not having that in, how's that apply?
So in addition to the above described activities, that is however business is defined, an individual shall be deemed to be in business if that individual owns and rents 2 or more residential units, okay? So if you rent just one, you're not in business, as long as it's long-term. The very last sentence of that highlighted area that says this applies to both short-term and long-term rentals, that would have to be changed so as to delete short-term so that it applies only to long-term. Did I answer your question?
So right now, one rental unit is excluded. You don't have to have a business license for one rental unit.
No, you do.
No, you do.
You do.
That's the problem. That's the problem. So the problem is this: the current business license that went into effect January 1st has defines business as only the first sentence. So business means a calling, occupation, profession. I think everybody would agree that renting out a home long-term is not any of that. But it says who is engaged, that's engaged in with the object of gain, benefit, or advantage, either directly or indirectly. So if you rent out, you have a second house, you rent it out long-term, that's clearly a gain, that's clearly a financial gain, and you are required to get a business license. This highlighted area that was added to our old ordinance was clearly added in to prevent folks in that situation from having to get a business license and to incur those fees and expenses.
All right, so I guess when I read that, I am looking at still just a single business license, because even without that, if we just read what considers business, it would be 1 or 2 or 3 or how many?
That's under the current ordinance.
Under the current ordinance.
So if you look at, so Sarah has the 2 up. So on the right-hand side where it says business, you see it? That is current. That's the current definition of business. So if you suppose you own 2 rental properties, you live in one, you rent out the other, you need to get a business license if you're renting it out long-term. If you're renting it out short-term, you're going to need to get a business license. If you rent it out long-term under our current ordinance, you're going to need to get a business license too. If you had rented it out before the current ordinance went into effect, you would not need a business license.
All right, any other additional questions for Mr. Keaveney?
I don't think I've clarified it for you.
I'll let everyone else ask questions,
Okay.
and I'll come back and, any questions? Mr. Flowin, go ahead.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that the IRS rules regard rental income from one property as passive income. It doesn't really treat it as business income. And I think that's a pretty significant reason why this rule makes very little sense in a long-term kind of way. I understand and won't comment on the need regarding their need for a business license regarding short-term rentals, because I recuse myself in regards to short-term rental matters. However, regarding rental property, I think that it's such a significant activity in Beaufort County, and it actually inures to the benefit of the whole county to be able to have rental properties available for people who are here, military families coming in and out of Beaufort County. And it generally is usually on the lower income scale that people will rent property before they're qualified to buy their own home or in a position to buy their own home. So having rental property available and at a lower cost is in the county's best interest. We always talk about the need for low and moderate income housing in Beaufort County, and quite frankly, this ordinance stands in the way of that. And so I would like to make the motion, sir, that we direct County Council to forward. We actually direct County Council and ask them to amend the ordinance so that the highlighted material that's in our packet here, except for the words applies to both short-term rentals and long-term rentals, be changed to this applies to long-term rentals only, period. That's my motion, sir.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there anyone like to second that?
I'll second it.
Yeah, would you?
All right, so it's been, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to ask something.
Yes, Mr. McCollum, go ahead.
I don't understand the motions, but I'll circle back to that. It's probably pretty simple, but I misunderstand it a little. I know the state has passed this ordinance, and in the town of Hilton Head, the business license effective January 1st extends to all people who have a long-term rental, whether they've just started it or whether they've always had it, so that you have to register your property as a long-term rental, and you pay on the gross proceeds that you collect with no deductions. The tax is not that onerous. It's $92.50 for the first $2,000, and then $1.70 for every $1,000 after that till you top out your gross proceeds. So if you make about $20,000 a year in rent, you're paying about $135 a year for your business license. But it applies to everybody who has even one long-term rental. And that wasn't the case last year, but it is the case now this year. So I'm not sure I'm clear on Brian's motion, and if we could just explain for me what we are trying to accomplish with it and whether or not it contradicts what I've just said about what the municipalities are doing.
So in response to your question, Councilman, we adopted the standardized business license model that the state adopted, I want to say like in 2000 and maybe 18, it's Act 176. And the purpose of that standardization was to standardize the process and the procedures that are used for business licenses throughout the state because they varied so much from district to district, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That act does not direct how municipalities and counties define business activity. The town of Hilton Head has chosen to define business as folks who rent out a single residence on a long-term basis.
Right.
County Council in 2014, in the ordinance that it adopted, chose not to include those properties in the definition of business. When County Council adopted the 2020 ordinance, it failed to bring forward that exemption. And so, in failing to bring forward the exemption, suddenly anybody who rents out even a single home on a long-term basis must get a business license. The town wants to do that. The town of Hilton Head wants to do that. It has consciously made that decision. What we're asking this council is if that was this council's intention in 2020, or if this council really wants to continue the exemption from 2014 forward. Did that make sense?
Right, so now I understand what Brian's motion was, which was to, I think I understand it, was to impose a business license on a single long-term property. Is that right, Brian?
No, exactly the opposite, Larry. I was saying that a person who owns one long-term rental will be excluded from the definition of a business.
Okay, so they don't need to get they don't need a business license for a long-term rental.
For one rental, yes. If they have two, it becomes a lot less like passive income. In fact, it's not considered passive income anymore. That's an active business.
Okay.
And so it makes a little sense to have a business license.
And it applies only in the unincorporated areas of the county. So, Councilman McKellen, if I own a home here in the unincorporated areas that I live in, and I own a home that I rent out on a long-term basis, more than 30 days, in the unincorporated areas, I won't need to get a business license. But if I own and occupy a home here in the unincorporated areas, and I own a rental property in the town of Hilton Head, I'm going to have to get a Hilton Head business license to do that.
I got that.
Okay.
So if we exempt one long-term rental, we may stand in conflict with our neighbors in the municipalities who are requesting or requiring owners of one property, and no one's happy about it, by the way, who have one property to get a business license. I don't know yet. I just happen to live in Hilton Head, and I know what they're doing here. I don't know what Beaufort's doing, or Bluffton, or Port Royal, or Yemassee, and I wonder if anybody else does. Are they requiring, under this new consolidated business license that the state has put together, are they requiring one property owner long-term rentals to get a business license? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the standardized Business License Act doesn't set forth those requirements. That's up to, how you define business is up to each of the political subdivisions.
Okay.
Okay? Sorry, maybe I should have started there.
So does anybody know if any of the other municipalities are requiring those licenses, or is it just Hilton Head?
Can I answer that?
Brian, if you have an answer to that question, because I know we have other folks, but yeah, go ahead if you have an answer for that for Larry.
Sure. I know that the city of Beaufort has required it for about 3 or 4 years now. And I know that almost everybody who has one ignores that rule. They just don't file for a business license.
Got it.
I'm sure that some do, but I know 2 or 3 that don't.
What are their names?
Nice try, Larry.
Right,
Brian Llewellyn, I can tell you that.
Let me ask a question.
Mr. Dawson, go ahead.
Yeah, help me understand. I thought I heard earlier that, and Tom might have said it, that under the current license, business license that we have in Beaufort County, one home being rented short-term requires a business license. Did I hear that correctly?
Effective January 1st, 2022, that is correct.
All right, so now we're proposing to make the addition that if an individual owns 2 or more long-term rentals, they are to be required to get a business license.
So what we're trying to, effective January 1st, 2022, if you own 1, 2, 3, or 10 rental properties long-term, you need to get a business license. Okay? What we're trying to do is walk back the requirement. What we want to know is if you want to walk back the requirement for getting a business license to only those who have 2 or more long-term rental properties.
Okay, now I got it. Thanks for that, Gerald. I didn't get that. Now I got it.
So wait a minute. I'm still not clear as of yet. So Brian's motion is nullifying what you just said. Is it not, Tom?
Brian's motion is to put in effect, in effect, reinstate the exemption. So Brian's motion would put the walk back in effect. If you own and rent only one house long-term, you don't have to get a business license.
Got it.
But you would need to get it for short-term.
You definitely will need to get it for short-term, and we'll collect accommodations taxes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the reason it applies to short-term under one unit is because we use the business license process to trigger the collection of the accommodation taxes in unincorporated Beaufort County.
All right, Mr. Dawson, anything else that you had?
No, I'm all right.
Mr. Glover and then Mr. Robin.
And I support the motion that's on the floor, so there's no question about that. Thank you, Brian, for the motion. Mrs. Ham came to us at our last council meeting expressing a business license or tax or license she had to acquire because of property. Is that pertaining to this here?
Well, I'm not exactly, I mean, I listened, I was here when Ms. Ham talked. I'm,
okay.
Not entirely sure what she was complaining about, but.
Yeah, we have a lot, including Ms. Ham, complaining about this one issue because those folks that own one rental property in unincorporated Beaufort County just received a letter saying that they would need to come in and purchase a business license. So if those folks are in the military and they've been deployed somewhere else and they have a house here and they choose to rent that out because they may come back here one day, then the way the current amendment reads is they have to buy a business license in order to rent out the home that they may come back and use as their primary residence at some point down the road. We are undoing that and are asking you all to undo that, and Councilmember Flewellen's motion does exactly what we're requesting you all consider today.
Okay.
Then the other question I have is that I got a phone call about somebody who's basically subject to this ordinance, but they live in the city of Beaufort and they're wondering whether the county was actually collecting now for the city of Beaufort as well as for the county. Could you clarify that for me?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
No, that we are not collecting for the city of Beaufort, but if they own, to Tom's point earlier, if they own, the way the current ordinance is worded, if they own one rental property in unincorporated Beaufort County, they have to buy an unincorporated Beaufort County business license regardless of where they live.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Robin?
Yeah, the motion, I think, is just for you all to come back and bring us an amendment to capture the intent of the 2014. This came up because Ms. Ham called me and I had a conversation with the administration. It's just common sense, and I think if we were to go ahead and do it, it might actually give the municipalities pause to go back and look at whether they have the right thing. So I'll call the question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Are there any objections to the motion on the floor? If not, no objection, we'll move this then to county council and have the addition added to our ordinance of what needs to be done, and we'll look at that. I'm sure we'll have more questions at that point, so.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, will we be voting on this at the next county council meeting?
I would hope so.
Yeah, we can bring
No
the
reason why.
amended ordinance forward on the 24th. or whatever that-
Appreciate that. Thank you. That's clarity.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin. All right, let's keep moving here. Let's go to number 12, Public Defender's Additional Fund Request for fiscal year 22. And I think, Ms. Harriet, you've got this?
Yes, sir. This item was on county council's agenda, and council voted to defer it back to finance committee for further discussion. So I wanted to answer any additional questions that council may have regarding this request. To provide a small update, after asking the public defender's office some questions, her request was reduced to $83,198.15 for the remaining fiscal year 21-22 budget. But this will be a permanent request for fiscal year 23 moving forward, totaling $166,397, beginning in fiscal year 23.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McCallum, go ahead.
I have some concerns about this, only because in fiscal year 18-19, the budget was only $850,000, and then we increased it in 2021 to $1,650,000, and that included $150,000 for a software program, and then we kept it there at that number, but reduced the 150 and took that out. And we have essentially almost doubled that appropriation, and it was necessary to do so. There's no doubt about that. I'm just curious to try and understand what the purpose of this money is and what it's for. And I read in the submission that it's for, can't keep people working there because they find more lucrative positions outside of the public defender's sphere. And there's a plan to increase the salary levels so that there'll be some retention there. And the increase in the salary level is at the Social Security increase for this year, which is 5.9%, let's say 6%. But that 6% that the Social Security Administration and people who are getting federal pensions receive is for people who are retired. So if they were making $2,000 a month in Social Security, they were able to get a 6% raise or $120. But if you're going to give a 6% raise to someone making $70,000, that's almost a $5,000 raise. So I know that at the federal level, at any rate, active duty workers have just been granted a raise by the president of somewhere around 2%. And I know that the governor is asking for a raise for state workers, and I think the public defenders qualify as that. So if that occurs, they'll be getting a raise there more in line with what other active duty members of service are getting. And I'm curious to explore why the Social Security number was used rather than an active duty person who's making more than the individual on Social Security. In the past, Social Security raises were like 1.8%, 2.4%. If you were making $2,000, you got $40. So it wasn't a big deal. This one is a big deal. It's 6%. So if $2,000, you're at $120 a month, which gives you another $740 a year, I guess, something like that. But the 6% on a big salary doesn't make any sense to me, particularly in the middle of a fiscal year. But if there's an adjustment to be made to the pay plan for recruiting and retention, I think it would be more appropriate to have that plan presented to us during the budget cycle so we could see what the sources of revenue are for that office, what all the sources of revenue are in addition to what we're providing, then get an idea of what the salary range is for people, and find out in the largest circuit in the state where the public defender is placing resources and how much of those resources are in Beaufort County and what are the contributions being made by the other 4 counties in the 14th Circuit. So all those questions I don't think have been answered or addressed here in this submission, just to give people raises during the last half of this fiscal year. So generally I object to the request, and I think it can be better, it's better suited to come to us in the next budget cycle.
Well, I think that staff's recommendation to us after looking at this is that the Public Defender's Office has had 3 openings for the past 2 years they have not filled, so they do have a surplus. And
They have available funds in their vacancy savings currently within their current appropriation.
So what they're asking for, what Ms. Mark Giddings is asking for, is actually she's able to do that in her current budget. The increases in salary she's talking about and other items. So at this point, staff has come back and said that
We feel that we could fund this request for the remainder of fiscal year 21-22 out of current vacancy savings. And we have a meeting scheduled with Ms. Mark Giddings and her staff on Thursday to kind of go over the final figures of that.
And so to answer your question, Larry, it would be then this coming fiscal year, whenever she'd come and ask for money, that we would then look at her finances and all those questions you're asking about would be the proper time to do it.
Well, with this surplus money there, do we have to approve the 6% raise, or is that just something that the department head can do independently of the funding source?
I believe
Yeah, I don't think we can do that. And Mr. McCullough, the reason I'm jumping in because you asked me to serve as a liaison for the Public Defender's Office. Let me see if I can answer some of those questions for you at this time.
Okay.
The Public Defender's Office is having a problem maintaining lawyers at this time, attorneys. and they are currently paying those attorneys in the $50,000 range, and they are not staying on board. So what she's asking right now is for council to approve a salary increase for those attorneys. That's one. She cannot really do that unless she have the funding for it. So she's asking for this council here to approve that salary increase for those attorneys, tier 1 attorneys as well as the tier 2 attorneys. That's one situation here. The other one, dealing with the cost of living, she's asking for the cost of living at this time because Beaufort County gave a salary enhancement on all of their employees, but she was not subject to that. So basically, she's just asking for that to take place. Now, we can decide here that may be too much for her to ask at this time, but I think the most important thing is that she needs the salary increase for those attorneys. That's more important than anything else.
So I think the question was do we need to, we would not approve salary increases for her attorneys?
You would not.
Yeah, I believe you approved the annual appropriation during the budget process, and then therefore her increases are within her budget as long as she maintains her appropriation.
And we feel at this time that she has enough vacancy savings in her budget to handle her request.
She has enough vacancy savings and enough surplus in her fund balance to cover whatever she would need to expend through the remainder of this fiscal year. She does not need your approval to set salaries and the cost of living. So unless you are willing to make a motion to approve the additional money as listed on this agenda, and someone makes a motion to the affirmative of that, that would be fine, but otherwise there would be no action for you all to take today.
Absent any of our action, she could still provide those raises from the surplus that's in her current budget through the end of the year, right, Eric?
That's correct.
With no approval from us.
Mr. Flewellen, go ahead.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, I would beg to differ with the administrator. There is currently a approved motion of this body to recommend to County Council that the award, the change in basis, I guess the 161,000 be approved. And in order to effectuate what Mr. McKellen wants, we need to have either a revote or a new motion on this matter. And because we recommended approval to County Council, and County Council is waiting for action by this committee. Otherwise, County Council takes up the recommendation at the next council meeting with an affirmative vote of this committee.
Yeah, I think what as I recall, and I'm going to look to my backup here, as I recall, at first reading, you all voted for first reading of the item with the caveat that item come before finance to give staff an opportunity to review the financial situation and have discussions with the public defender, and that we present a recommendation to Finance Committee that the Finance Committee could decide on and bring back to you all prior to second reading. So there is no motion beyond first reading at this particular point. We're trying to comply with conditions of the motion at first reading. And that's our recommendation is that we do not need to offer any additional funding at this point, whether it's 160 or 83,000, based on the existing vacancy savings and fund balance in the public defender's accounts at this point. There's plenty of money in this fiscal year underneath this fiscal budget for her to operate with these increases without need for further council action.
If I may.
Yes, Ms. Mark Giddings, go ahead.
I apologize for being late. We just got notified of this and the link was sent to us. But I just want to be clear with regard to the fund balance. The fund balance that we have had since I've been circuit defender has been funds provided by all of our resources. That doesn't include the municipalities because they weren't contributing during that time. But that money came from Allendale, Hampton, Jasper, Colleton, Beaufort, and the state. And I don't think it's right for Beaufort County to consider the fund balance because we can't go in and determine how much of that money was contributed by Beaufort County. Secondly, we have a meeting with finance and HR on Thursday and to discuss the discrepancies that we have regarding the positions that we have available. I don't believe that the HR department and finance is considering the contract positions that we have in Beaufort County. I don't think that they're taking into consideration the amount of money that we pay. We have approximately 3 or 4 contract attorneys in Beaufort County. They're not full-time employees, but their contract comes out of our budget. And we went with contract employees in an attempt to fill positions and also to save money by not having to pay fringes. HR has in their numbers that we have an administrative position available that is vacant, and that is not correct. We don't have and have not had an administrative position vacant in years. So that I think that the council should consider the discrepancies between what the HR department has and what our office actually has. And I also think that they're taking into consideration all the positions in the entire circuit. My office has provided the council with the number of employees that we actually have that work in Beaufort County compared to the number of the employees that we have that work in the outlying counties. Beaufort County has all of our resources. The finance department knows how much money we receive from every funding source that we have. We've been transparent. We've not tried to hide money. The finance department knows that we don't qualify for grants, that we have not received grants. All the funding that we have had goes into Beaufort County. And I know that there was a question about the Tahoe that was recently purchased for our office. When we had a meeting with the finance department, we discussed that Tahoe was purchased because the state funded 2 circuit investigative positions. I had a choice to pay mileage to those investigators or to purchase a car. It is more fiscally responsible to purchase the car than to pay mileage for those 2 people who live in Allendale, work and live in Colleton and work throughout the circuit to travel the circuit. One of the reasons why I do not use my gas card is because of the amount of money, the amount of miles that I put on my Tahoe driving from Allendale to Beaufort or Allendale to Colleton or Allendale to Jasper. I use my personal money to gas my vehicle so that my employees can have money to gas their vehicles. They don't have the miles on their cars that I do. So in that, I'm trying to be fiscally responsible. I pay for a lot of things out of my own money when other offices need it, just so that I don't have to use money from the general fund or from another fund, because I know how tight our finances are. I would not come before county council if we did not need the money. I am constantly trying to fill the 2 vacant positions that we have in Beaufort County. Right now, I have 2 circuit-wide attorney positions that are available, but those positions will not be in Beaufort County. They will be in Jasper County and in Colleton County. So I think the finance department and the HR department needs to refrain from making a recommendation until the discrepancies have been cleared up. Because I don't think it's fair to my office to say that the money is there when it's apparent that there's a discrepancy in the number of employees that they say that the number of positions that they say that we have vacant, and our office doesn't show those positions as vacant.
Well, I think that what we need at this point is clarity on, it was sent to county council for a first reading. It was sent back to finance and for us to look at that. So is this something that our action here today then decides whether it goes back to county council, or does it automatically go back to county council?
Yeah, after my initial response and having a chance to think about it, I think probably given the motion that was made you all need to make some sort of recommendation out of finance back to county council for second reading consideration, whether that be to fund or not fund, or to amend the amount to 83, or to not, for that amount to be zero, or to deny the request. So I think you do need to make some motion here today to send back to county council so we can put it on the agenda for second reading.
All right, so we'll make a motion today, but it does go back to county council for the second reading. So do I have,
Yeah, if you all recommend, I still think since we've got an ordinance pending, and
I think it should be voted on.
I think we've got to dispose of it prior to second reading. So I think you all need to make a recommendation today here, and then we'll do whatever we need to do with it at council meeting on second reading.
All right, so it's going to go back to county council, and we need to make a recommendation today, or do we need to send it back to county council?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
For the 83,198.15. Whatever is here.
All right, so Mr. Glover has made the motion to fund and send it back to county council. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
All right, we got a second. At this point, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion that we need to make?
Yes.
Mr. Robin, go ahead.
I think clearly that this is better taken up in the budget process. And we're not talking about 83, we're really talking about setting the bar for the full budget, which would be the 100 and whatever it is, 166.
Right.
67. I think the question on the table is whether or not the Defender's Office needs money this year, or whether they're okay until June 30th and we finish our budget. So the administration has suggested that they are okay. The Defender has, I think, said that they're not okay. Maybe the Defender could come back one more time and just answer that question about whether you will run out of money or whether your operations will be hampered if we don't do something before at this point.
Okay, so we have a motion.
My only concern is I literally have two assistant public defenders and who are asking for a raise right now. And, they've met with Councilman Glover. He came to our office, he met my entire staff, he discussed with them, what their concerns were. And they are aware that the council is considering their raises. And so they came back to me last week and they asked the question. And what concerns me is Charleston County has already taken two of my lawyers. And if I don't give those two lawyers raises, if I lose them, my office is going to be in pretty bad shape. And I cannot compete with Charleston County at the salary that I have. I have literally lost two lawyers to Charleston.
So do you have sufficient
concern about their raises? I honestly can't run an office if they leave.
Right.
That's just, I can't do it.
So if you provide the raises, do you run out of money this fiscal year?
If I provide the raises and hire the two additional attorneys at the tier 2 salary, I will run out of money.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve this. And again, this is just going back to county council for second reading. So I guess we're going to need to do is there any objection? If there's an objection, we're going to do a roll call vote. Is there any objection to sending this back to county council for second reading at this time?
Yeah, I object. I'd like to wait for that HR meeting on Thursday before we make a decision on this.
All right, so we have one objection. Any other objections?
I would agree. I think we need information. It sounds like we got two different numbers and two different things going on here until after that meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because it also recommends a dollar amount, and if we're going to recommend a dollar amount, we need to know, is that the right number?
All right, so we have a motion on the floor, which we need to vote on. So, Brian, you want to help me with this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would, again, the problem is a matter of timing at this point. We really If we're going to vote yes, we need to do it soon. If we're going to vote no, then it really needs to be final. And so so that Stephanie Smart Gettings, I'm sorry, I apologize. We agreed at the last meeting. I'm only going to call you Stephanie. So please apologize. I accept my apology.
I have no problem with that at all.
Well, Stephanie would then need to go ahead and adjust her budget and resign herself to the fact of not being able to hire the 2 new attorneys at Tier 2, or in the alternative, not providing the pay increase for the Tier 1 attorneys and potentially losing them. And so, honestly, folks, for the amount of money that we're talking about, I don't see it as a deal killer anyway, considering how much we pay the public defender for the very great service that the public defender's office provides for us. It's really a very small matter. And I know that for the amount of money, I know for a fact, the amount of money that they're paying an attorney in Beaufort County, they're hard pressed to find anybody of any kind of quality. And so I encourage the public defender to find the best attorney available. I want the people who the least among us to have the best defense. I want them to get the best that we can afford to give them. And I don't see this $181,000 or $161,000 as a deal killer. And so I recommend, my vote is to send this forward to County Council recommending approval. And it will be that. It won't change at second reading at County Council when this comes up. And so, yes, I think a voice vote is required, and we need to see what this is. When it goes to County Council, there will be second reading. It would just then carry a negative vote from this committee if this motion passes. But County Council will still be required to vote on it one way or the other, up or down.
Correct. So let's go ahead and do a roll call vote. I'll start with our committee members. Actually, I'll start with who made the motion, which was Mr. Glover.
Yes.
And then who seconded it was Mr. Rodman?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling.
Yes.
All right, and then Mr. McKellen.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Passman.
Yes, to move it to county council.
Ms. Howard.
Yes.
All right, and the chair votes yes. So that is that 1 abstention and 8 votes? Is it 7 votes? 7 votes. All right, so it will then be moved to County Council for second reading. In the meantime, if we can get any more information, because obviously those questions will come up at the next reading.
I'm at a loss for what you all want us to do now. We brought you all a recommendation. You guys move it to a second reading. Are we done, or are we going to get the second reading and you all say, well, what staff going to do on second reading? So I need some direction from the committee here.
The only question was from Ms. Howard and Mr. Passman, and that was for additional information out of the HR meeting. If we can be presented that information at the next council meeting, I think that would give everyone a chance then to be able to vote on the second reading.
So just so you know, we track the expenditures and we know what the finances are in the department. Sure. So that's clear. There's no discrepancy about what's being hit on the accounts. And right now, just so it's clear to council and this committee, right now, over halfway through the year, the personnel account for the public defender's office stands at 44% of the actual budget. So there is money savings in that account that's going to accrue through the rest of the fiscal year. So
there's one big question that has to be answered on my part, and that is something that was said, that the fund balance can't be used because we don't know what portion of the fund balance is attributed to any one of the entities. That indicates to me a problem, because that means you could never use fund balance for anything. So we need an answer as to how we clarify any fund balance in this account being attributed to one or more of the entities, and clear up the discrepancy that the public defender says regarding the number of employees.
We can clear up the discrepancy on the number of employees. I will be unable to clear up the fund balance question because while we can see what's going into the account, we cannot verify where that money is coming from based on what I'm being told by our finance department. So we don't know what county is putting what amount in. So the fund balance could be, a 33-33 split among all the counties or 25% among all the counties, or it could be 100% Beaufort. We don't know at this point, but we'll do our best to try to determine that.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Glover, you were next.
Fund balance is basically used, in my opinion, as a management tool in this case here. So they're using that fund balance to manage their whole entire circuit, which includes 5 counties. So I can understand why they may not have been tracking where exactly that money comes in and who has a reserve from various counties, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. I can understand that. That could be a nightmare for anybody to try to keep up with. But they are not misusing their fund balance. They use it as a tool. In this case here, she said that she needed a vehicle. She bought the vehicle, which serviced the whole entire circuit out of the fund balance. So to me, that's using that fund balance to manage the circuit or their district. To me, right now, I am comfortable with the 83,000 at council. If you come back with something more or less, I'm fine. I think what Mrs. Gettings is after is that she understands that this council approved the tier, the salary increase going forward for the next year. She can do it this year, but she also will be back here next year saying that this money I need because I've increased these salary. I'm supporting the increase for those attorneys and also for her staff.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm just saying that the motion that was voted on and approved doesn't obligate the staff to do anything else. And I just wanted to get clear that you all don't want us to do anything else with this particular item when it comes forward for second reading. But the chairman of the county council clarified that for me, and we'll be ready when it comes up at second reading. So anyway, thank you all.
Mr. Robin?
2 things. One is, not necessarily for this year, but going forward, I think the Defender's Office needs to be able to identify the incoming and outgoing expenditures to the best they can. And just like the solicitor does that for the various counties. Secondly, it's kind of related to this, but I'd never thought about it before. When Pinky, I think when you were talking, you mentioned like in a prior budget, there may have been kind of what we'd normally call a non-recurring expense that's in the budget. And then we typically kind of look at the budget from the prior year in order to set the budget going forward. Now, at the state level, they break things into recurring and non-recurring. And I'm wondering if that's something that we need to be more sensitive to so we don't automatically slip into increasing a budget too much based on what might have been a one-time expense. So that may be something for us to think about as we go forward. Maybe I don't even understand the situation, but it strikes me that could happen to us.
All right, good. And let me add to what Stu had just mentioned as being chair and being here for the past year. I've realized that when it comes to solicitor's office and the public defender's office, that there are 5 counties. And I think that the numbers that I have heard is Beaufort County funds about 76% of those 2 offices. So if you stop and think about that we're one of those counties, but yet we are funding 76%. I think that's something that we're going to have to do a better job of identifying funds coming into both of those. How we do that, I've thought about even having to FOIA the solicitor's office, which I hate to do, just to say, okay, where are your funds coming from? But that's an option that we've got. Again, just so we know how much money he's getting from each county and what he's getting from the state, because that's what's caused all of our arguments here. That's what's caused all of our issues that we've got. So taking up too much time, let's move on then to 13 and 14. We'll take those both at the same time, and that is consideration of reappointment for Jonathan Sullivan and Anita Singleton Prather to the Accommodations ATAX Board with an expiration date of 2026, and also the consideration of the reappointments of Raymond Trey Ambrose and Mark Bailey to the Beaufort County Airports Board for an expiration date of 2024. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objection to those appointments? All right, we are completed, and appreciate everyone's time. Apologize again, we took so long today. I always think it's going to be a short meeting, and for some reason, it never works that way for me. So I apologize. And Stu, you're up next. The meeting's adjourned, and how much time you need?
Sarah, but